Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Have you ever worked so hard for money only to lose it again and again? You save, you earn a little more, and then somehow it slips away. This lesson is simple English, made to help you improve your English while we look at something deeper together. There is a reason this keeps happening to you, and it is not bad luck. It is not the economy. Something hiding inside you keeps pulling you back, something you have never looked at directly. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the hidden reason you keep losing money right when it starts to grow. You will finally know how to let yourself keep it. Here is something most people never say out loud. Some of us are afraid of money. Not afraid of not having it, afraid of having it, afraid of what it means, afraid of what people will think, afraid of becoming someone we do not recognize. You might be nodding right now and you do not even know why. Think about it. How many times have you gotten close to something good? A raise, a bonus, a new client, a big opportunity, and then something in you pulled back. Maybe you missed a deadline. You never miss. Maybe you spent the bonus before it even landed in your account. Maybe you turned down the opportunity and told yourself it was not the right time. The timing was never really the problem. Underneath the timing sat a feeling quiet but strong that said, "This is too much. This is not for me. I do not deserve this." You cannot keep what you believe you do not deserve. Hold that idea for a moment. What you believe you do not deserve, you will always find a way to lose. This is the center of everything we are going to talk about today. Money is not just numbers. Money works like a mirror. It shows you what you actually believe about yourself, whether you want to see it or not. For so many people, that mirror shows fear dressed up in different clothes. Sometimes it looks like bad luck. Other times it looks like laziness. Or it looks like poor timing, an excuse that always seems to show up right on schedule. Today, we are going to take that mirror down from the wall and look at it honestly together. 10 lessons wait ahead of us. Each one uncovers a different piece of the fear that keeps you from holding on to money. Real stories, real people, some famous, some ordinary, all human, all worth learning from. Stay with me until the end, because the moment you understand where this fear was born, you can finally stop it from quietly running your life. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Where the fear was born. Nobody is born afraid of money. A baby does not cry at the sight of a coin. That fear, if you carry it, was taught to you. Quietly, slowly, long before you understood what money even was. Think back. What did you hear about money when you were growing up? Maybe your parents argued about it in low, tense voices behind a closed door. Maybe someone in your family said rich people are greedy, as if wealth and goodness could not exist in the same person. Maybe you heard, "Money does not grow on trees," said with a tired sigh, like money itself was something to be suspicious of. There is a girl I want to tell you about. Let's call her Mia. She grew up in a small house where money was never discussed openly, only in whispers, only in worry. Her parents were good people, hard-working people. But every time money entered the conversation, her mother's face would tighten and her father would go quiet, staring at nothing in particular. Mia never actually heard the words, "money is bad." She felt it instead in the silence, in the tension, in the way her mother would apologize for buying anything nice for herself, even something small. By the time Mia became an adult, earning her own paycheck, a strange pattern kept repeating. Every time she got a little ahead financially, she found a reason to spend it. A new phone she did not need, a trip she could barely afford. She told herself she was simply enjoying life, rewarding her hard work. But underneath that story, something else was happening. She was quietly making herself smaller, less visible, less comfortable. Because somewhere inside, her being at ease with money still felt wrong, almost dishonest. This is what a money script is. A belief about money that you absorbed as a child long before you had any ability to question it. And one that now runs quietly in the background of nearly every financial decision you make as an adult. A child who learns that money is dirty tends to grow into an adult who struggles to hold on to it. A child who learns that money is simply a tool, neither good nor bad on its own, tends to grow into an adult who can use it without shame or apology. Nobody chooses their first beliefs about money. You were too young to argue back, too young to ask for evidence, too young to separate your parents' fear from your own future. But here is the encouraging part. You are not too young now. You can finally look at the belief directly. You can ask yourself, is this actually true? Or is this simply something I absorbed because I happened to be standing close to someone else's fear at exactly the wrong moment? That single question carries more power than most people realize. It becomes the first crack in a wall that has stood since childhood. And once a wall has a crack, light eventually finds its way through. Money scripts do not only come from what parents said directly, they also come from what parents never said, from the silences that filled a house whenever a bill arrived, from the way a family celebrated a windfall or quietly buried it under worry instead. Children absorb tone long before they absorb vocabulary. A shrug, a sigh, a tense pause before answering a simple question about a purchase. All of these teach a lesson just as effectively as any spoken sentence ever could. There are, broadly speaking, a handful of common scripts that researchers in financial psychology have identified across many different families and cultures. Some people grow up with a script that says money is scarce, and no matter how much arrives, it never feels like enough. Others grow up with a script that says money is dangerous, something that changes people for the worse. So success itself starts to feel like a quiet threat to their character. Still others absorb a script that says worth is measured by struggle, so ease and abundance starts to feel suspicious, even undeserved. None of these scripts are permanent sentences. They are simply starting points absorbed early that can be examined, questioned, and slowly rewritten with enough honest attention. Mia, the woman from earlier, eventually noticed her own pattern of quiet self-sabotage. She began asking herself, every time she felt the urge to spend right after getting ahead, a simple question. What am I actually afraid will happen if I keep this? Over time, simply asking that question started to loosen the grip the old script had on her decisions. Lesson 2. The guilt that comes with growth. Something strange happens when money starts to grow. Logic says it should feel good, exciting, even simple. Yet for many people, it feels heavy instead. Uncomfortable, almost wrong, in a way that is hard to explain to anyone else. Let me tell you about a woman I will call Carol. Carol worked hard her whole life. She raised 2 children mostly on her own, took extra shifts whenever she could get them, skipped vacations year after year, and made every single dollar stretch as far as it would go. One year, everything changed. A relative passed away and left her a modest inheritance, not a fortune by any measure, but more money than she had ever held at one time in her life. You might expect Carol to feel relief. Instead, she felt panic settle into her chest. She could not sleep for the first few nights after the money arrived. Her mind kept circling back to all the reasons she did not deserve it, all the people who had worked just as hard or harder and ended up with nothing. She thought about her own mother, who had struggled financially her entire life and never experienced a moment like this one. The guilt sat on Carol's chest like a stone that would not move. So Carol did what so many people do without ever realizing it in the moment. She started spending. New furniture arrived within weeks. Gifts went out to nearly everyone in the family. A vacation got booked without much real thought behind it. Within a handful of months, the inheritance was completely gone. Carol did not lose that money because she was careless with it. She lost it because keeping it felt genuinely unbearable. A discomfort louder than any gratitude she might have felt. Psychology has a name for this experience. It is sometimes called sudden wealth syndrome, a wave of anxiety, isolation, and guilt that can appear whenever money arrives quickly, whether through an inheritance, a bonus, a lottery win, or even a significant raise. The mind simply is not prepared for such a sudden gap between what it expected and what it now actually has. Guilt does not protect you. It only empties your hands. Notice something important here. Carol never consciously chose to throw the money away. Nobody wakes up and decides, "Today I will destroy this gift." It happens quietly instead, one small decision at a time, each one easy enough to explain away on its own. If you have ever felt a strange discomfort after an unusually good financial month, or found yourself spending almost immediately after receiving a bonus you were genuinely excited about, this pattern might be exactly what was happening beneath the surface without your full awareness. The next time money grows in your life, even by a small amount, try pausing to notice the feeling that arrives with it. Is it excitement? Or is it something closer to guilt, wearing excitement as a disguise? Simply naming the feeling accurately is the first step toward no longer being quietly controlled by it. Carol eventually spoke with someone about what had happened. A financial counselor a friend recommended after noticing how anxious Carol seemed even months after the inheritance was gone. In that conversation, Carol said something that stuck with her for a long time afterward. She said she had spent her whole life being the person who sacrificed, who went without, who made things work for everyone else. And that having money without a struggle attached to it felt almost like betraying that identity. Hearing herself put it into words that way, she realized how strange the belief actually sounded, and that recognition became the beginning of a slow, honest shift in how she related to money going forward. Lesson 3. Your mind is trained to expect not enough. Here is something worth understanding clearly. Your mind is not broken, it is trained. If you grew up in a home where money felt tight, where every bill arrived like a small emergency, your brain learned something very specific and very useful at the time. It learns to watch constantly for danger. It learned to expect that things could fall apart at almost any moment. None of this reflects weakness. It reflects survival, plain and simple. The difficulty is this kind of training does not switch off automatically the moment your situation improves. Even after you begin earning more, even after your bank account starts to grow steadily, an old alarm system can keep running quietly in the background, scanning for whatever might go wrong next. Psychologists describe this pattern as a scarcity mindset. When a brain becomes accustomed to lack, it grows remarkably skilled at noticing threats, and remarkably poor at noticing genuine opportunities sitting right in front of it. Picture a smoke detector set far too sensitive. It goes off even when there is no fire nearby, simply because it was built during a time when smoke seemed to be everywhere. So if you notice yourself feeling anxious, even while your finances are actually improving, that reaction does not mean something is currently wrong with you. It means an old system, built for an entirely different situation, is still switched on inside you. A mind trained for lack sees a bill and feels fear rise immediately. A mind trained for enough sees the same bill and simply pays it without much drama attached. The gap between those two reactions has little to do with how much money someone actually has. It has everything to do with what a person's mind has learned over years to expect. Here comes the encouraging part. Just as a mind can be trained toward fear, it can also, with patience, be retrained toward calm. This takes repetition. It takes noticing the alarm as it rises and gently reminding yourself this particular reaction belonged to a different chapter of my life. I am not living inside that chapter anymore. What your mind was trained to expect, it will generally keep finding unless you consciously and repeatedly teach it something new. This does not mean pretending real problems do not exist. It means no longer allowing an old alarm system built years ago for a different life to quietly make financial decisions for the person you have become today. Keep this idea close, because in the next lesson, you will see exactly what happens when this same fear collides with real, growing success. There is a simple exercise worth trying this week. Each time you feel a flash of anxiety around a financial decision, no matter how small, pause and ask yourself one honest question. Is this danger happening right now, in this moment? Or is this an old alarm reacting to a memory from years ago? Most of the time, once you slow down enough to actually ask, the honest answer is the second one. The bill in front of you today is rarely the same emergency as the one your family faced years earlier. Separating the present moment from the past pattern, even imperfectly, is often enough to soften the intensity of the reaction, one small moment at a time. Lesson 4. When success feels dangerous. Some people fear winning even more than they fear losing. That sentence might sound unusual at first, but stay with the thought for a moment. Losing feels familiar. Even when it hurts, it feels like something you already know how to handle. Winning, real and growing success, can feel like standing somewhere entirely unfamiliar. And the mind rarely trusts unfamiliar places right away, even good ones. Let me tell you about a young man I will call Daniel. Daniel worked at a mid-sized company for years, quietly doing solid, dependable work, never really standing out, never really falling behind either. Then, after a genuinely strong year, he was offered a promotion. A better title, real responsibility, nearly double his previous salary. He said yes immediately, without hesitation. Of course he did. This was everything he had been quietly working toward. But something shifted soon after that. Over the following weeks, Daniel started missing small deadlines, exactly the kind he had never missed before. He would open his laptop, fully intending to finish an important report, and somehow end up scrolling on his phone instead, minutes turning into an hour. He showed up late to a meeting with the very executives who had just promoted him an executive team he genuinely respected. His colleagues were confused and, honestly, a little worried. Daniel was clearly talented. Everyone around him could see that plainly. So why did he suddenly seem to be falling apart, right at the moment things were finally going well for him? He was not lazy. He was scared of what came next. Beneath those missed deadlines sat a quiet, uncomfortable thought Daniel could not fully explain even to himself in the beginning. A feeling that whispered, "What if I cannot actually handle this new role? What if everyone eventually realizes I do not truly belong here? Would it not somehow be easier to fail quietly now than to succeed loudly and risk losing it all later in front of everyone watching?" This pattern is one of the clearest signs of a hidden fear surrounding success and money together. Self-sabotage rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It usually looks like small delays, small mistakes, small, almost invisible moments of pulling back right when things are genuinely going well. If you have ever noticed yourself slowing down unexpectedly, getting distracted more than usual, or making uncharacteristic mistakes shortly after a win, this lesson might be the mirror you actually needed. This does not prove that you lack capability. It is proof that some quiet part of you remains afraid of what real capability actually looks like once it is fully claimed. Naming this pattern out loud carries real power. Once Daniel could finally say, "I think I am scared of this success," something inside him began to relax almost immediately. The fear did not vanish overnight, but it stopped running the show from the shadows. Lesson 5. The Man Who Earned Millions Twice. Money without belief rarely stays for long. Few stories illustrate this idea more clearly than the story of Mike Tyson. At the height of his boxing career, Tyson earned an extraordinary amount of money, reported to be around $400 million across the years he fought. Mansions, fleets of cars, a life most people can only imagine from a distance. Then, in 2003, he declared bankruptcy. $400 million gone. This was not a man who lacked talent or even opportunity. Tyson had both in genuinely enormous amounts. What he did not have, by his own later reflection, was a stable belief system around money, one built early enough or strong enough to actually hold on to everything his talent had earned him. The spending grew extreme. Trust in the wrong people proved costly. And underneath it all was a young man who had traveled from real poverty to almost unimaginable wealth in a very short time, without ever quietly being taught how to keep any of it. If this particular lesson reminds you of your own experience, even in a much smaller way, keep listening, because the next section changes the entire conversation. The real difference does not depend on the amount of money at all. It is about what you honestly believe you deserve to hold on to. Tyson's story often gets told simply as a lesson about reckless spending habits, and on the surface, that is true enough. But look closer, and something deeper becomes visible underneath the spending. A person can generally only keep an amount of money that matches the story they believe about themselves. When money grows faster than belief, something eventually has to give way. Talent brought the money in. Belief decided whether it stayed. This is not meant to make you feel sorry for someone who had so much. It is meant to help you see something honest in yourself instead. Sudden success at any scale tests whether your inner belief has actually grown to match your outer results. When it has not, money tends to find a way to leave one decision at a time until the two finally settle back into balance. The lessons ahead will help you close that particular gap, not necessarily by earning more, but by learning to believe differently. It is worth noting that Tyson himself later spoke openly in various interviews over the years about growing up in poverty in Brooklyn before boxing changed his life so suddenly. That kind of rapid transition from having almost nothing to having more money than most people will see in several lifetimes. leaves very little time for a person's internal beliefs about money to catch up with their new external reality. The lesson here is not really about boxing or fame or even bankruptcy specifically. It is about the size of the gap between what a person earns and what a person deep down believes they are allowed to hold on to. Lesson 6. The voice that says you don't deserve it. There is a quiet voice that tends to show up right when things start going well. It rarely announces itself loudly. It almost never says you are a failure in plain words. It is far softer than that. It whispers things like, "This will not last," or "I only got lucky this time," or "Someone else probably deserves this more than I do." This voice connects to something psychology calls self-worth, the quiet belief you carry about your own value, largely separate from what you have actually achieved. For a great many people, that inner belief simply has not caught up yet with their outward success. Consider MC Hammer for a moment. In the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, he became one of the biggest names in music, earning more than $30 million from a single record. By 1996, he had filed for bankruptcy. The public version of that story usually focuses on the mansion, the enormous staff, the lavish spending habits. And those details were real enough. But look a little closer, and a pattern emerges that fits perfectly here. Someone who rises extremely fast from very little to extraordinary wealth almost overnight often has not had enough time to build an internal belief matching that new external number. In cases like this, the spending can quietly become an unconscious way of returning to a more familiar financial identity. Believing you earned something feels entirely different from believing you simply got lucky. If you believe you truly earned your success, you tend to protect it, invest in it, and build steadily on top of it. If you believe you merely got lucky, some quiet part of you expects that luck to eventually run out, and without realizing it, you may help that very expectation come true. You do not need luck to keep money. You need permission. That permission never comes from anyone else. Not from your parents, not from society, not from the people around you who may still see you exactly as you used to be years earlier. It comes instead from a quiet internal decision that says, I am allowed to have built this. I am allowed to keep it without apology. That decision will not erase every doubt overnight, realistically, but it changes the overall direction. Instead of quietly working against your own success day after day, you start working even imperfectly at first to actively protect it. Self-worth, in this context, rarely announces itself as a single dramatic belief. It shows up instead in small daily habits, the way someone undercharges for their own work, the way someone gives away credit that was rightfully theirs, the way someone hesitates to ask for a raise they have clearly earned through years of solid performance. Each of these small habits quietly reinforces the same underlying message that taking up financial space is somehow inappropriate. Reversing that pattern rarely happens through a single bold act. It happens through small corrections, repeated often enough that a new, steadier message eventually takes root. Lesson 7. Why windfalls disappear so fast. The real issue is rarely the size of the money. It is the size of your belief. You have probably heard stories about lottery winners, people who suddenly receive a huge amount of money, far more than they ever imagined holding at once. And yet, within a few short years, much of it has quietly disappeared. This pattern shows up so often that financial researchers have studied it for decades now. Why does this keep happening so consistently? Logically, receiving a large amount of money should improve someone's financial situation permanently. But for many winners, something else unfolds instead. Their spending, their decisions, even their relationships begin shifting in ways that gradually return them to a financial reality that feels familiar, even when that reality sits far below what they were actually given. This has little to do with foolishness. It happens because money on its own does not automatically change a person's identity. If someone's internal sense of self was shaped around a certain financial reality for years, a sudden windfall can feel less like a genuine gift and more like a disruption. Something the mind quietly tries to correct without asking permission first. Imagine for a moment receiving a sudden gift of a large sum of money tomorrow morning. Really sit with that image. Notice what surfaces. Pure excitement, or also a small flicker of unease, a quiet voice wondering what you would even do with it, whether you would handle it correctly, whether people around you would start treating you differently. That flicker deserves attention. It often reveals more about your true relationship with money than your current bank balance ever could. Most winners drift back to their earlier financial identity, not because the money vanished on its own, but because their beliefs never grew large enough to hold it in place. In a strange way, that is actually encouraging news. It means the real work does not depend on waiting for some future windfall. It means growing your belief now, gradually, using the money you already have, so that whatever arrives later, small or large, finally has a stable place to land. Money always seems to return to the size of the story you carry about yourself. Lesson 8. The body remembers before the mind does. Fear does not always announce itself with words. Sometimes it simply tightens your chest. You might assume fear around money lives purely in the realm of thought, something confined entirely to your mind. But quite often, your body knows first, sometimes long before your thoughts catch up. Have you ever noticed a tightness settle into your chest right before checking your bank account? A small wave of dread arriving before you even open a bill? Tension gathering in your shoulders the moment a financial conversation starts before a single word gets spoken? None of that happens randomly. Your body is simply responding to years of built-up association between money and stress, long before your conscious mind fully catches up with what is happening. This matters because if you only work on changing your thinking, your beliefs, your inherited money scripts, while ignoring what is unfolding physically in your body, fear can remain stuck at a level words alone rarely reach. Try a simple practice. The next time you notice that familiar tightness, whether while checking an account, opening an app, or having a financial conversation with someone, pause for just a few seconds. Notice exactly where in your body the sensation lives. Your chest, your stomach, your jaw perhaps clenched without you realizing it. There is no need to fix anything immediately. Simply notice it and breathe slowly the same way you would approach any other form of stress. This small act of noticing accomplishes something important. It moves fear from something automatic and hidden into something you can genuinely observe. And whatever you can observe, you eventually gain the ability to change. Notice the fear inside your body, and it slowly begins to loosen its grip. This does not offer a quick fix, and it will not make financial fear disappear after a single lesson. But it adds something powerful to everything discussed so far. The money scripts from Lesson 1, the guilt from Lesson 2, the self-worth question from Lesson 6, none of these live only in your thoughts. They live in your body too, quietly, persistently. Learning to notice that physical response offers one more way to gently loosen a pattern that has been running silently for years. You are not only changing your mind throughout this process, you are also slowly and steadily teaching your body an entirely new way to respond. Some people find it helpful to keep a small private note of these moments. Nothing elaborate, just a short line jotted down whenever they notice a strong physical reaction tied to money. Over a few weeks, patterns often start to emerge. Maybe the tightness always shows up on a particular day of the month, right before rent is due. Maybe it appears specifically around conversations with a certain family member. Seeing the pattern written down in your own handwriting or your own typing tends to make it feel less mysterious and more manageable. Almost like finally being able to name a weather pattern that used to feel like it arrived without warning. Lesson 9. Choosing to hold what you earn. This is the moment everything can genuinely change. We have walked through a great deal together already. Childhood beliefs that quietly shaped how you see money. Guilt that empties your hands right when things start to grow. A trained alarm system that expects lack even while things are actually going well. Fear of success itself, disguised as small mistakes and missed deadlines. Stories of people who earned extraordinary amounts and lost it, not from lack of talent, but from a widening gap between money and belief. A quiet voice whispering that you do not deserve it. The way windfalls tend to return to the size of the story you carry. And finally, the way fear lives inside your body, not just inside your mind. All of it points toward one central truth. A person rarely holds on to money they secretly feel they have not earned. But there is another side to that same truth, the side we have been quietly building toward this entire lesson. You can begin starting today to believe you deserve to keep what you build. This does not happen instantly through a single decision made once and never revisited again. It happens through a choice made quietly, again and again, especially in those exact moments when the old fear resurfaces. Someone living by an old script feels guilt whenever money grows and finds some way to make it disappear soon after. Someone choosing a new script feels that same discomfort arrive, notices it clearly, and chooses to stay with the money anyway, even while uncomfortable. Living by an old script feels entirely different from writing a new one, and that is the real choice sitting in front of you every single time your finances improve even slightly. Feeling fully confident is not a requirement for making this particular choice. Confidence usually arrives after new behavior, not before it. What you actually need is willingness. Willingness to notice old fear the moment it rises. Willingness to pause instead of spend automatically. Willingness to tell yourself quietly but firmly, I am allowed to keep this. You are allowed to keep what you build. Repeat that sentence in your own voice, your own words if you prefer. A sentence like this returns to often enough, in enough real moments, is how an old belief slowly transforms into a new one. Lesson 10. Small proof. Repeated change rarely needs to be big. It needs to be repeated. One dramatic moment is not required to rewrite years of accumulated money fear. What actually works is small repeated proof evidence that quietly teaches a new belief one small experience at a time. Picture someone who has genuinely done this work. A person who used to spend a small bonus the same day it arrived, driven by a nervous energy they could never quite name. Now, when a similar bonus shows up, they try something different. They let it sit untouched in the account for 1 full week before making any decision at all. Just 1 week. Not some dramatic act of willpower, simply a small, deliberate pause. That single week becomes real proof. Proof that the money did not vanish the moment they chose to hold on to it. Proof that nothing terrible happened simply because they allowed themselves to keep something good even briefly. The following month, maybe they extend that pause a little longer. Maybe they open a separate savings account purely to watch a small number grow instead of shrink for once. Maybe when that old anxious feeling arrives, the same tightness in the chest described back in Lesson 8, they pause. Notice it clearly, and breathe, instead of immediately reaching for a card out of habit. None of these individual actions look large from the outside. None of them make for a dramatic story on their own, told at a dinner party. But together, repeated steadily across weeks and months, they build something far more powerful than any single big decision ever could. They build a new lived experience, whispering, "I can hold money, and nothing falls apart because of it." Every time you keep a little more, you prove the old story wrong, one small moment at a time. This is the real quiet work underneath everything discussed today. Not one single moment of dramatic transformation, but a long series of small, repeated choices, each one adding fresh evidence to a belief finally being allowed to change, slowly and honestly. Think of it the same way you would think of learning a new language, which, in a sense, is exactly what you are doing right now in this very lesson. Fluency rarely arrives from one long study session. It arrives from small, repeated exposure, one new phrase practiced today, another reviewed tomorrow, until the unfamiliar slowly becomes natural. Your relationship with money can change through that same quiet, repeated process, one small proof at a time, until holding on to what you build finally feels less like an exception and more like your normal, steady way of living. Feeling fearless is not a requirement to begin. You only need enough willingness to try the small version starting today. Let's take a moment now to look back together at everything we have walked through. We began by learning that fear around money is often born quietly in childhood, inside beliefs absorbed long before anyone could question them. We saw how guilt can empty our hands right when money starts to grow, and how our minds can become trained to expect not enough even while things are genuinely going well. We looked closely at how success itself can feel dangerous, how a promotion or a sudden win can trigger the very self-sabotage that seems to make no sense from the outside. We heard the story of a boxer who earned hundreds of millions and eventually lost it not from any lack of talent, but from a widening gap between money and belief. We heard about a musician whose spending may have quietly served as an unconscious way of returning to a familiar identity. We talked through why windfalls so often disappear, why the body remembers fear before the mind fully catches up, and finally, how choosing again and again to hold on to what you build becomes the real turning point in someone's financial life. You cannot keep what you believe you do not deserve. Starting now, you can begin believing something different. That belief will not shift in a single day realistically, but it shifts a little more each time you notice fear instead of quietly obeying it. Each time you pause instead of spending automatically. Each time you allow yourself to keep something good just a little longer than feels entirely comfortable at first. Keep learning English, keep learning about money, and let both finally stay with you. If this lesson meant something to you today, I would genuinely love to know. What is the one money belief from your childhood you feel ready to finally let go of? Tell me below in the comments. Sometimes, simply writing it down becomes the first small proof that things really can be different. Before we close, here is one small practical way to carry this lesson forward into your week. Choose one financial moment coming up soon. A paycheck arriving, a bill due, a small bonus, anything ordinary. When that moment arrives, pause for just a few seconds before reacting the way you usually would. Notice whatever feeling shows up, whether it is calm, tension, guilt, or something harder to name. You do not need to solve it in that moment. Simply noticing it clearly and without judgment is itself a small act of rewriting an old script. Real change around money rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It looks like one paused breath before a purchase, 1 week of letting a bonus sit untouched, one honest question asked quietly instead of an old reaction repeated automatically. Across enough small moments like these, a person's entire relationship with money can shift, not through force, but through steady, patient attention. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take care of yourself, and take care of everything you continue to build. See you in the next lesson.